Hey everybody, and welcome to our mini-series on how to read one of the most abused books of the Bible. That's right, I believe Genesis is one of the most argued over books, and it's often because we approach the book of Genesis either as a historical textbook, trying to find where our historical roots are, how the beginning of everything began, and so on and so forth, or we look at it as a book of principles. We approach it and we try to dissect all the little stories and apply them directly to our 21st century lives. And when we do that, we're often abusing the story of Genesis. Now, here's the profound thing about story, is that a good story is able to take the reader to a place of both reality and possibility all at the same time. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. You have probably never cast a spell in your life, but there's something about the relationship between Harry and Ron and Hermione that is alluring, that draws you in, and also keeps your mind wandering, makes you think of a whole different world. And while I never live in a utopian world where there are districts and all the districts are putting forth their representative to go into arena and fight and kill each other so that district can have bread, there's something about the story of Katniss that draws us in, that makes us want to be in that world temporarily, right? Both reality and possibility mixed together to make a good story and to have an overarching theme and plot line, and that is how we should be approaching the book of Genesis. There is a twist and turns and characters and development and plots and climaxes, all of it tied together in a story format that needs to be read together. And today we're going to break down part 2, a second tool on how to read Genesis properly. The first episode, or first video, you can go back to it. We talked about context, about reading the book of Genesis within its context, within its world, not ours. And today we're going to talk about patterns, about these hyperlinks between these stories, that whenever we learn to read it with ancient eyes, we find these hyperlinks and we're taken back, and the author has a way of connecting these stories to make them both even more profound. But before we get into today's video, my name is Peyton Minzemeyer, and I'm helping you fall back in love with your Bible, with your faith, and with Jesus. And I do that through writing blog posts every week, multiple times a week sometimes. You can find all of those at peytonminzemeyer.com. I know that's difficult. Sometimes I sing a jingle to help you spell it. If you know it, you can already sing along with me. It's from the Mickey Mouse, MINZENMAYER, right? And you will find me at peytonminzemeyer.com. There you can find all of my previous blogs, including this one and this series where I break these down in more details. You can also go to YouTube, type in my name, and there you will find all of the videos that are included in these series and other videos that I'm making to help you fall back in love with your Bible, your faith, and Jesus. Let's get into today's video. So today we're talking about patterns. Your Bible is stuffed with patterns. I mean, stuffed like whenever you get finished eating your Thanksgiving meal and you're walking around, your belly bulging out. I mean, that kind of stuff. I mean, they're all over the place. You don't believe me? Well, here's an easy one for you to play with. Do you think it's a coincidence that Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 and John chapter 1, verse 1 both start with "in the beginning"? Right? Thousands of years separate these two verses, right? They're actually in different testaments, one in the Old Testament, one in the New Testament, and yet they both begin with "in the beginning." Coincidence? I think not, right? There is something that the author John wants to do to bring his author back to Genesis, bring their mind back there for some bigger meaning. Now, we're not going to break down the Genesis and John hyperlink, but I do want to talk a little bit about hyperlinks and talk about one that you probably had no idea was in your book of Genesis. So what I believe the author tries to do with patterns, or what I call hyperlinks, is just like any other hyperlink, right? Whenever you are reading an article or even on Facebook and there's a link to something else, the author wants to bring your mind back to, just for a second, another story. And by doing that, they're trying to help you connect the dots, saying, okay, I'm telling you this story now, But I want you for a moment to think back at this story, or go read this story, because whenever you can understand this story and this story put side by side, all of a sudden there's going to be a new meaning that emerges from it. It's fascinating, but we often don't pick it up as modern readers, right? We're reading with our modern eyes, or reading with a modern language, and we completely miss out on all of these hyperlinks that are riddled throughout our Bible, including the book of Genesis. And so to help you, right, equip yourself with a tool, we're going to play with one particular text at the very beginning and towards the end of the book of Genesis. Okay, I lied. We're actually going to be going to the very beginning of Exodus. Now, the author is making a hyperlink in Exodus to a much earlier and very popular story in Genesis. So we're going to get to the hyperlink in a second, where the author is taking us. But first we have to talk about this little phrase in Exodus. And it's found in the introduction of a pretty popular character in the Bible Old Testament story, right? Maybe you know him. Rescues the Israelites from Egypt, parts the Red Sea, goes up on Mount Sinai to collect the Ten Commandments from God. Yes, we're talking about the Mr. Moses. Yeah, maybe you know him. Maybe you don't. I don't know. But the point is that at the very beginning of his life, we have this interesting scene where his mother can't keep him, so she puts him in a basket. He floats down a river, and he goes into the Pharaoh's home. And there's a word used in that story that's only used one other place in the Bible. And is that ever a coincidence? Most likely not, especially when the stories are extremely similar. So let's see if you can find any word in your English translation that's going to take you back to a Genesis story. So we're going to read in Exodus chapter 2, verse 3. But when she, Moses' mother, could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him. That was it? Did you find it? No? Okay. Well, I'm going to help you out. There's a word in there. Here, I'm going to highlight it right here. It says papyrus basket. You've actually have seen that word before. Now, if you think back, I can't remember any other time I saw a basket in a story. It's okay. Let me change it to Hebrew, see if that helps. It's actually the word tavah. Did that help? Probably not. Okay. Probably no Hebrew scholars out there. That's okay. Let me help you one time further. Tavah is actually used, like I said, one other time in your Bible. Can you guess where? Let's go all the way back to Genesis chapter 6, 13, 14. So God said to Noah, make yourself a tavah of cypress wood. Okay. Now, if we know anything about the story of Noah, what do we know? He built a big boat. But surely the author is not making a connection between Noah's giant boat and Moses' tiny basket, salvation basket, his papyrus basket. Surely the author isn't connecting these two things, is he? You better believe he is. The same word used for Noah's boat is the same word used for Moses' basket. But why? What is the author trying to tell us? Why is the author in Exodus making a hyperlink all the way back to Noah's Ark? Like, what is the point? And you probably don't know, because we're not taught this way. We don't catch these subtle hints in our English language. And that's why I'm going to help you discover what that meaning is. So your hyperlink senses are tingling. You see this connection between Moses' basket and Noah's Ark, his giant boat, and you're thinking, okay, what is the connection here? And here's the point, and here's the connection, and here's what I believe the author is trying to get at. Both of these stories, both of these arcs, were absolutely critical for the future of humanity. And both of these arcs carried great treasure. They carried God's promise down the river, through the water, saving God's line and God's promise. Think about it. Noah comes from Noah and God's promise, and Moses, God's promise being fulfilled throughout history despite the devastating circumstances that surround both of these people. They're both saved on water, they're both saved through ark, and the author is trying to create an echo of a theme that he's establishing throughout all of these stories, and it's this: God is faithful. And God, when he makes a promise, when he makes a covenant, he's going to keep it. God's promise was to protect and provide a plan of salvation for humanity, and that plan is completed through both Noah and Moses and all the way down the line until we will eventually come to Jesus. Right? God is faithful. God can be trusted. God's plan is going to be fulfilled. How many of you today need to hear that message? You see, oftentimes we'll read stories of the ark and we think, well, was it really true? How big was the boat? Were there really every animal, right? How did he know the difference between a male lizard and a female lizard? And then you have Moses, right? Well, how big was the basket and what were the circumstances? And that really happened. And we completely lose what the author wants us to focus on. There's a theme here. Our God is faithful. He is faithful, and his plan of salvation is becoming true, and he's providing salvation through this ark. And he wants to remind you in Exodus, just like he was reminding you in Genesis. He's saying, don't forget. I know we just went through all of this story of Genesis, but don't forget, God is faithful. And just like that, the author is creating stepping stones over the river of the Bible, stones that we can step on that connects the Bible and its story so that we can move through it. And in this instant, with this hyperlink, he's reminding his readers of the faithfulness of God's plan of salvation for his people, the people that he loves, and how God is going to provide that plan both through Noah and Moses, and it's going to continue on. And that's the importance of finding patterns in our text, meaning or finding hyperlinks that are going to connect us to deeper meanings of the text. And speaking of meanings, that is going to lead us to our final video in this mini-series of how to read the most abused book of the Bible. I believe Genesis is often abused, used in arguments and debates. It often tears people away from their faith. Atheists often use it against us, against Christians, as a weapon. We need to stop that, and we can stop it by learning how to read it and equipping ourselves with tools. In our first video, we talked about context, about putting the text back in its original place where it was intended. We talked today about patterns, about these hyperlinks that make the text like a spider's web and connecting all of these bigger themes in the story. And in our next video, we're going to talk about meaning. You see, oftentimes we approach the text looking for meaning, looking for something, or we come to it with a certain question and we're wanting the Bible to answer that question, preferably how we want it to be answered. Stop that, right? We have to instead look at what was the meaning of the text within its context and using these patterns. So that's going to be in our next video on meaning, our final video of this series of how to read the most abused book of the Bible. My name is Peyton Mensmeyer, and I am helping you fall back in love with your Bible, your faith, and Jesus. And I do that through writing articles and making videos like this. You can find all of those at PeytonMensmeyer.com. It's right there on the screen, PeytonMensmeyer.com. You can also go to YouTube, type in that name, and you can subscribe to my channel and get all of these videos like this one. They'll pop up immediately, and you'll be alerted right when they come out. Don't forget to do that, because the next video is coming out very soon, and you'll get to complete this mini-series on how to read the most abused book of the Bible. Again, I'm Peyton Mensmeyer, and I can't wait to see you on the next one.